Okay, I'll call the meeting of the Engineering Committee of the Architect Engineering Board to order, and we'll proceed with the agenda. We do have all members present, correct?
Mr. Chairman, let me real quick just call roll. We do have one online. Two. Not that I'm aware of. But he is present. We'll note that Mr. Bricktie is present. But for the committee meeting, Mr. King. Well, calling roll.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, here.
This is just because we have somebody online.
Yeah.
Mr. Campbell.
Present.
Mr. Barrick.
Here.
Mr. Heathcote.
I'm here.
Mr. Bursai.
Here.
Okay. Mr. Bursai is joining us virtually. We can't see him, but he can participate fully in this meeting via voice. Mr. Chairman?
Okay. Based on the agenda, I think we have two applications to discuss. That was the first item. Adrian Esparza, I'm sure I didn't pronounce that right. Application was reviewed by Ricky, and Robert wanted to discuss. I think it had to do with the references. Robert, would you?
Yeah, sure. So, got it? Okay, got it. When I looked at the references, he had one supervisory reference that probably would go, but his dates, he said he knew the applicant from 12/18/2017 to 12/15/2017. So I don't know how you know somebody for -3 days. And then he was really the only, I mean, the other references were, we were co-workers. We worked in the same department. And then some guy even asked, said, well, I talked to his boss. He said he was a good guy or something. I'm trying to find where that is.
I think I read that too.
Yeah. Worked in the same department, kind. In anticipation of writing this reference, I spoke with direct supervisor. Anyway. So that.
But apparently did not supervise it.
Did not supervise. And again, he has one supervisor reference, but his dates are goofy. And I don't know when he really knew him, because it's minus dates. If you knew him from 12/18/2017 to 12/15/2017, did you really know him? That's a philosophical question, I suppose, but maybe not an engineering question.
Well, it could be an error.
I'm sure it is, but that's something that
we could ask him to correct, possibly.
Yeah.
Is that?
I mean, if
that was corrected.
Yeah, I mean,
okay?
if it's enough time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the
Right.
other. That's what I wasn't sure about, is how much time did he actually supervise him? If that's supposed to be 2018 and he just did it for a year, then to me his supervisory references are probably not like I would. I like to see somebody with a little bit more knowledge of it. So that was my only concern.
One other question I had, and I'm trying to find it in here. And I may be mistaken about this one, but it looked like I think he graduated in 2011 from TSU. Is that correct? But he passed the EIT in 2020.
Which I think that's fine. I mean,
He still got his 4 years.
4 years
of progressive
is 4
experience.
years is not. 4 years is after you get out of college, not when you pass your.
I did not know if that was a mistake. Also,
Yeah, I don't know. And I go back to the supervisor part. He did work at Middle Tennessee Electric, but he says he just worked for about a year, 2017 to 2018. And again, if the supervisor just knew him for that long, that's really, to me, it just seemed like we had about a year.
Right.
And if we had more, then we had more. But that's my concern.
I did look at his experience during that time period, because I'm like you, thought that was a fairly short time, but his experience was
Pretty good.
pretty good.
I'm not discounting that, but It's just a year if it is. I mean, under and just kind of let you all know how my mind works on these. When I see an initial exam applicant, I really want to see good supervisor references. The comedy ones, there's so many permutations that it's hard to put in there because of how long they may have been in. You know, former bosses that may be retired or not no longer with us or whatever. As long as they've got a pretty good work experience and have some people that are familiar with their work, I kind of give them a little bit more leeway just because they've been in the profession and licensed for so long. But when you have an initial applicant that may only have a good, oh, I'm sorry, that concerns me a little bit. Thought I was talking loud enough that it would get there, but then.
Mr. Campbell, quick question, and this is for our use internally here. If a year is too short, then what would be an appropriate length of time? Meaning if the correction is made and it comes back, if we can help, ease the process by having a parameter in terms of how long a reference may be, maybe it's, what's the word? How long of a time period someone needs to spend with somebody to be an appropriate reference?
Well, I mean, I think you need to have some form of reference. I mean, obviously our law says 4 years, that you had to have 4 years under a supervisor with the PE. I mean, that's kind of what we say. I think we bend that a little bit as long as they've got some people familiar with their work that may not be in a direct supervision role. When I look at his references, he's got one really direct supervisor. He's got another person says that he worked at Goodman Manufacturing in the product engineering department with him, who's also a licensed engineer. So if that supervisor, I'd like to have 2 or 3 years because I think the other person would know something about what they're doing. But that's, again, just from his time period that he's working for the electric co-op, it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
But like you said, Robert, we would feel better about a reference from a supervisor for the entire 4 years that he's claiming for progressive experience. With some employers, that's difficult.
I 100% agree. That's why again, as long as people are familiar with their work and are other engineers, I try to give them some credit for that because you're right. And a lot of these applicants, just the way they word stuff sometimes kind of hamstrings them because they'll say, I worked in this department, and really that person was probably supervising their work, but it kind of doesn't, we try to ask those questions to see. But it appears to me he just has 1 year with a supervisor. And maybe another year or so with somebody that's familiar with his work that I would give credit for. But so I would like to have at least a couple of years, maybe even at least 2 to 3. I hate to give you a fluffy answer, but that's
okay. It gives us something to kind of mark against, and when we get back in touch with the applicant, we can indicate, please try and have your references be longer than 2 years, 2+ years.
And again, you could have 4 different supervisors that would meet that. 1 year with this one, 1 year this one, 1 year with this one, or whatever combination. I'm not looking for one person for 4 solid years, but there needs to be other PEs that are familiar, oversaw, did whatever with his work for that 4-year period.
But in this particular case, there's an error in the dates that
yes,
we need to
But
communicate.
on the actual application, it looks like, the dates look correct. Like the JPW Industries was from 12/14/18 to 3/22/21. Middle Tennessee Electric was from 2/14/17 to 2/15/18. The Goodman Manufacturing was from 2/6/16 to 6/24/17.
Michael, that's something else. I'll let you finish reading. We as a board when somebody's in a manufacturing environment, we probably don't go as to the book when it comes to direct supervision from engineers, because it is very difficult to find references in a manufacturing environment because they've got the exemption, the industrial exemption. So you just don't see as many PEs in industrial as you would, for instance, in civil engineering consulting world. But we do want people that are other engineers that are familiar with their work, and whether that be an outside vendor they work with or other things, we do try to make some equivalents, understanding that the pool's really small, that they have to pull from. There are some that are better than others. Some industries that are better than others at having more people, but
some federal agencies. EDOT used to be that way, but it's better now.
yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But in essence, I mean, and you're exactly right. I know we've looked at that in the past, and the folks that are in industry manufacturing, they got a little more challenging role or a challenging effort to get the direct supervision under a licensed PE. And generally, one of the things when I see these, based on your reviews, I try to go back and look at what specifically they did while they were there. And when I looked at, well, I guess it was last night when I looked at the services he actually performed, they're pretty intensely engineering. He has 4.8, a combined total of 4.8 years, and granted, half of that was not under the supervision or direct supervision of a PE. But again, the work that he was doing met the minimum threshold of providing engineering services, engineering design, or engineering services. So
We need a motion to ask Wanda to make that communication back to the applicant.
I just sent an email to the, I just sent an email to the reference, but it looks like from the experience, he worked with him 1 year.
What it looked like.
But I just sent for clarification.
That's how long he was at that company. So that's what I assumed it was. I was just saying that to be.
Two of the references were from that company.
Yeah.
To give your answer, no, a motion is not required. A motion would only be required if you were going to agree on allowing this applicant. So for us to kick it back to the applicant, no motion is necessary.
What exactly do you need from the applicant?
Again, if this applicant, let's say this is 1 year and he's had supervision, I would like to see another, let's say 2 years of somebody with some supervision experience, some other person with 2 years of supervisory experience. And that can come in with a PE, right? They can come in different forms. Again, whether it's an outside vendor that he's worked with or whether it's somebody that really is familiar with his work and has worked with him on projects.
It could be a contractor that he worked with while he was in service to one of these that has an engineer on staff that he worked with, or like Robert said, a vendor that comes in as a material or equipment supplier to them that he worked with that has a PE on staff, or somebody with a PE that was affiliated with some of the work that he was doing.
And the dates on that reference form.
Yes, sir. They do.
Hey, anything else on that one? Okay, we'll go to Mark.
Steve.
Yes, Ricky.
Hey, just if I could just add, I'm seeing it the way everybody is. It looks like you've got 2 years that are directly under a PE or working with a PE. It's the last job he's had for 3 years that's really kind of in industry, more JPW Industries. So I think the way I heard it, the question is that did he have some direct contact with PEs otherwise that he can show and document during his time with JPW? Not necessarily can he get some more time in the future, but can he show some contact and working with PEs during his time with that JPW Industries, whether it's a vendor or contractor? Is that correct? Is that?
Yeah, I think that's what you understand in it, Wanda, that we're asking. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're all on the same page.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Mark Osborne. His degree is in engineering technology, so it doesn't qualify. He has sent an email asking us to reconsider, it appears. I'm not sure there's anything we can do if we wanted to do something, because, Maria, our law specifies the entry-level requirements into the profession. We are, like I think someone on the staff informed the applicant, that the board has made a recommendation to the administration to make some potential changes, and that's what we're working toward. But right now, I don't think there's anything we can do other than communicate that back to the applicant. Anybody have anything else on that?
What you said is 100%, and I go back to, I think it was the NCAAS meeting, whenever the engineering forum meeting.
Yeah.
That was. This is a topic that was brought up there that I believe NCAAS has a task force or something that they are looking at this engineering technology thing, because it's a problem across the spectrum. We're not the only ones dealing with this. From a pure education standpoint, they don't meet it, but there are other states that allow it. There are some
by statute,
and there's some that allow it with just a 4-year engineering technology degree, and some that are allowing it with additional experience. And so the caveats are all over the board. And NCAAS is, I thought, coming up. I don't know if it's at the New Orleans meeting or the next year. I got a little lost on that. Coming out with their own set of recommendations. So, and just saying that, I know we worked pretty hard on that, but it may be something that we want to also see what position they take nationwide, just to kind of make sure we're matching up with where the sentiment is across the industry. And again, that's just a comment. That's nothing.
Well, and there will be discussion about that, both sides. Some people will be adamantly for it, some adamantly against it. But I think what we've done, our recommendation, is to sort of pull us back in the mainstream of other states,
Yeah.
rather than being an outlier state.
that's correct, but that's not in law yet.
That's not. That's right.
Yeah. One reminder, at the last in-person NCES meeting, there was a vote on adding the engineering technology degrees to the model law, and it was an absolute tie vote. So it did not pass. But it's right there at 50-50 as far as the last time when they did vote on it 2 years ago, whenever the last in-person meeting was.
I sat in on that forum too. I think you and Ricky were both there, but I was interested to hear that one gentleman stated that in his experience, some 4-year technology degrees were equivalent and had been analyzed and shown to be equivalent, but
there's no list.
Yeah, there's no way to gauge that.
You remember Dr. Smith has gone through that process for us,
Right.
and found exactly the opposite, that it is not equivalent.
Well, I think this was just a particular curriculum
Yeah.
someone had determined was equivalent.
And I'd like to see the actual
Yeah.
review, because I sort of doubt it.
I've got a question about this applicant. I think in the past we've had somebody whose degree was called an engineering technology degree, but it was reviewed and found to be equivalent to an EAC degree, and so therefore met our law, and we've approved them. And this person has an engineering technology degree, and from what I understand, I mean, from what we've heard, engineering technology degrees can vary quite a bit across the country, or school to school, I should say. So does this person want to get their engineering technology degree evaluated and see how it stacks up with an EAC degree? Is that something that we maybe don't recommend, but we just let this applicant know that is a possible step, because our law allows an EAC equivalent degree to be approved, and it would take that step of having it evaluated. We just at least need to let them know that's a potential next step.
We could do that and have him contact NCEES. That would be his best bet, but
Right.
I'm not sure how much that would cost. That's the thing. I think they're pretty expensive.
I'm assuming it's going to cost some money, but I wouldn't say we'd recommend it, because it seems like in our experience most programs don't match up. And I looked at the curriculum, and it doesn't look like it would. I mean, I'm not a curriculum reviewer, but I didn't see the math and science in there that would take to get an EAC degree. But just if they wanted to know how short they were, or even not even if it met EAC, but how many classes would they need to be equivalent? That is it. I wonder if we should tell them that is an avenue.
I have a little bit different recollection of that. Do you all remember what Ricky's talking about? Because I recall that we had advised applicants to take their four-year technology degree to a accredited university and add courses to achieve the ABET degree.
That was my recollection too.
So we might ask Maria if is it possible to have a four-year technology degree evaluated by someone and then be allowed to sit for the exam?
Dr. Smith has done that for us before.
I mean, historically, the board has approved that. I mean, it is a way to get around the provision that states, that technology degrees aren't accepted, because in the rules there are, the reference to having them evaluated. And this gentleman mentions that in his letter to the board. So he's aware that that's something the board has done in the past. Also, I would just say with, the direction this is moving, just from a policy standpoint, it seems like a good idea that you all would allow this, but it's up to your discretion.
We can't allow it under the current statutes unless somebody determines that his engineering technology degree is equivalent to an EAC.
Yes.
We do have that option, so I stand corrected.
Thank you, Maria.
You just got to jump in.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
So two questions. Well, question one. I know I had a ruckus with this board 35 years ago over this same issue. I mean, and I think at that time there were 11 states that were ABET accredited.
It wasn't any of us.
Well, I know. It's Bill Stocker, as a matter of fact. I can tell you exactly who it was. But there were 11 states that required an ABET accredited degree at that time, and the other states had something. Issue was the same in many ways, in that there are all kinds of engineering technology degrees, and some of them are every accredited. My question is some place where we can see what states require what? I mean, I know we're trying
Yes.
to get into the mainstream of, or the middle or something like that of where the world is. And
We actually, Rob, we got that information some months ago when we first started this review process to look at some methodology to try to get background data and information about the difference between an ETAC and an EAC curriculum. And we looked at specifically the states that allow it. Allow the PE or set for the PE with an ETAC and what those conditions were, and the ones that don't allow it. And that I think I've got that information, but it was given to me. I think Wanda, maybe
There's a
did you
document.
have it?
You should have it somewhere because it's a table.
Okay.
I think
It
that was
says-
before he got on the board.
It may be.
It's been within the last couple meetings. Check.
I think, Robert, that may be maybe 8 months ago.
I think it was that long ago, but it doesn't matter. But we have a table that says.
well, somebody could just email me a copy of it,
Yeah.
just for my own. And then the other question becomes, could we determine this by school? I mean, Nashville Tech, no. Tennessee Tech with a technology degree rather than a Bachelor of Science degree, maybe yes. But that we came to a place where we as a board, talking about this for comedy only, talking about this. But I have a kind of a different opinion about if somebody's already registered someplace and been registered for a while and they're practicing engineers, that brings in a different deal than somebody trying to sit for the first time. But it seems to me that we could get to a place. Say nope or
I will
Michael,
say
I apologize. Michael, we can't hear the person that was just talking.
Okay,
Would you like
we'll
to
try and adjust
microphone?
Mr. Barrick's microphone to be a little bit more in
Thank you.
front of him.
Thank you.
testing 1 2.
I tend to agree with the things that you said. Unfortunately, that the methodology that we don't have the ability to determine whether or not one curriculum meets the standards of EAC equally. An ETAC degree, we always defer that to either NCAAS or Dr. Smith, who are supposedly experts at those determinations. We've never tried to take that on ourselves. But the other element of that is the way our statute is written right now, unless somebody determines that the degree that he's got is EAC equivalent, we can't. That article is very, very clear. Neither a 2-year nor a 4-year ETAC degree allows them to sit for the PE or become a PE by comedy. So obviously we've worked on that and we've got language to modify that, but it's not in place yet.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said about the guy having experience and what Alton said, our statute just doesn't allow it. However, what you're talking about doing potentially is like we do with the Washington Accord, where we've got a list of schools that are ABET approved or this. So my question would be, if you're ETAC approved, why don't you just go through the ABET process, EAC? If you're equipped, the school itself has a mechanism to get on that list, which is just get evaluated by EAC instead of ETAC. And I don't know what the ins and outs of that are, but it is kind of it's unfair. Well, it's not unfair. What we're talking about doing is exactly in line with what we would do with a foreign degree. We would get a foreign degree over here that we weren't sure met the ABET requirements, and we would say, hey, we're not sure if you meet them or not. Take your curriculum and get it evaluated in some method to see if you are ABET accredited. And I think we need to ask this gentleman kind of go through the same thing that says, hey, we get it. You know, you may be, you're registered, you may be very well, but our statute doesn't allow it under that condition. Go get it evaluated, and if it measures up, it measures up. Because that's how we do foreign degrees right now with ABET, non-ABET accredited. So it's the same thing. And this is, you know, I think too, we got to look at it in one part. I don't want to say we've put emotion into it, but there's a thing that we say they're lesser engineers, and that's not what we're saying at all. But there is such a disparity between those technology degrees across the breadth of the nation that it's hard for these 5 or 6 people or whatever on this board to make that determination just at a whim. It's hard for our staff to do it. So there's got to be some way to level that. And I don't know what that way. I think we've got an answer, but you know, I'm not going to sit here and evaluate a curriculum and say, like you just said, you know, the Tennessee technology degree is equivalent and the other one is not. We just don't have a good way to do that in here.
Well, I hope this sounds right when I say it. If the statute won't allow us to do it, why are we even talking about it?
Well, the statute will allow equivalent. It will not allow a pure technology degree.
Well, but if we're not the ones to determine equivalent,
right,
and the statute won't allow it, why are we talking about it?
Because he requested it, and we have the option to reply back to him and say, if you can demonstrate that this degree is equivalent to an EAC degree, then we can reconsider it.
Let's hear what Maria has to say.
Sorry, I just want to clear up any confusion. So in the rule, there is a provision that states if, like they're saying, the degree is not equivalent, then it can be evaluated. And if it's deemed equivalent, then that's kind of a bypass to the prohibition on the technology degree in this situation. And because all the technology degrees vary in, I guess, curriculum and levels of, you know, what the courses are, it's just another way around it that, you know, I mean, we do this for applicants who don't have technology degrees, but maybe they just don't have equivalent degrees. Yeah, in general.
But, you know, this is kind of an endless do loop. If we're not going to determine what's equivalent, and we're not qualified to determine what's equivalent, then
we refer it to people that do.
We have someone that we refer these out to, and they determine.
Until it's referred to someone who's equivalent, we're really just going around in circles.
Certainly.
But I think we need to make that recommendation to have somebody look at it.
Correct. That's what we'd be looking for from you all would be a recommendation for a review or a denial. Those are your only two options at this point, which is where the discussion should be. Yeah, to your point, that's where the discussion is going, whether you're going to recommend it be reviewed or you're going to deny it flat out.
I asked for clarification on that because I think we've done this maybe a couple of different ways where we actually asked Dr. Smith to review it. And then I think there have been times where we've deferred back to the applicant to say, hey, look, you send this in and you get the review done and the determination that it is or is not equivalent. And at that point, I suppose they're paying for it versus the Department of Commerce and Insurance paying for it. Is that correct? What is the correct protocol? What should we be doing? Should we be, as the Department of Commerce and Insurance, paying for those reviews, or should the applicant be doing that?
Out in the rule, it states that is at the expense of the applicant.
Okay, thank you, Maria.
I'm not sure how we can work it out, internally, like on the administrative end of having that done. I'm sure we can help facilitate that, but just as far as the rule goes, it states that is their expense.
So would it be okay or appropriate for us to direct the staff to do that when these things come up, to put it back in their court and to bring us something different not approving, not rejecting, just saying we don't have the power to make it go away. You have to do something else to make it okay, and we just do that through the staff and not through a full and lively debate at a board meeting.
I think, Rob, the staff tried to do that here, and this applicant requested or insisted or whatever that it be brought to the board. That's what I saw in the correspondence.
Okay. So be it.
He made a special.
Yeah, and I think he is just saying again, he just wanted to voice in writing that he disagrees with the rule and state his reasons for that, and now that's on public record. So,
but he does have another option if he chooses to pursue it, unless and until our legislation changes to allow an ETAC degree. But he can go back to NCAAS and ask them to review his degree to determine whether or not it's EAC equivalent, and if it's not, where the deficiencies are. And that's what we've done in the past, is we noted the deficiencies and advised the applicants to go get these additional. Oh, you missed a course in biology and you missed a course in chemistry and one semester of calculus, and if you accomplish those, then you would have fulfilled this responsibility.
I'm gonna go. I don't know if this is. Go ahead, Ricky.
Okay, just one point where, while we're talking about this applicant and the technology degrees, and we all know we've crafted some proposed legislation with Maria that gives an avenue for an engineering technology degree, and it involves getting more education in the way of either the courses in a master's program or just taking the courses, and more experience. And that's kind of where we're pointing this. We're not talking about somebody getting an ETAC degree that is not equal to an EAC and just having 20 years of experience being registered in another state that does accept that. I don't think we have been talking about that being a possible avenue.
Ricky, you're correct. That was not one of the avenues.
We haven't been talking about that, but NCAAS has.
Yeah.
Yes, and that was what Rob just mentioned. But that when an applicant comes to the board, that needs to be said. I mean, we don't have the avenue yet anyway, but if and when that happens, that at this point, that's not something we're talking about.
I understand Rob's position on this. Guy's been practicing engineering in a state for 10 years, preparing designs and drawings and other things. And it's, there is some level of common sense associated with this, or there should be, I guess, where if he's done that in other states and he's met these minimum design practice standards and he's a licensed PE, it kind of implies that he's competent to do it. But again, statutes are statutes.
So I don't know if we have to make a motion of this, but if we do, it's a motion that we tell this gentleman that our recommendation is that he get his degree evaluated to see if it is equivalent or not. And then if it is, he comes back and, then we get to take it up at that point in time. If it proves not to be, then I think we're kind of tied until whatever happens with our rewrite of the technology degree, So there needs to be a motion.
Second.
What?
Again, if you're just kicking it back to us to handle that, then we'll take care of that on our
Is
end.
everybody okay with the direction Robert stated? I think
Yes.
that's what we're talking about.
I think that's the only other mechanism we've got to try to help him.
Are we going to communicate back to him that regardless of how we feel about it, the statute won't let us do anything?
unless he can prove that his degree is equivalent to an EAC.
Right. If he sends it off and the expert reviewer looks at his
Talking
transcript,
about as it stands today, regardless of how we feel about his qualifications or whatever, we have a statute that we can't do anything about. Is that our position?
I wouldn't say we can't do anything about it because we're trying to, but
As it stands today,
as it stands today, that's correct.
You just want us to let him know that our hands are tied. Is that what you're suggesting, Rob?
yeah.
Okay.
I
I do think we typically cite the statute and give him the options. Is that correct?
he's already been notified that
Okay.
he knows that he actually said go ahead and put it in front of the board because he wanted a decision.
and he did, and he has,
Right.
and regardless of how we feel about it,
Statute
the
is still
statute
a
will not
statute.
allow the board to act on it as it is today, to give him what he wants today.
Not today, correct.
Okay.
I agree. I don't
After
think
the
we.
review,
Are
then
you
can talk about
asking
it
to
again.
put in the response regardless of the term regardless of how we feel about it?
Well, what I would really rather say is it came to the board, and we are not empowered to act on it as it stands today. If you want to say it,
Or approve it?
we're not empowered to do that.
Okay.
And we can continue that by saying, for the board to consider this again, you'll have to get an evaluation by, the NCES to
Determine equivalency.
deem equivalency, and then we can reevaluate at the board level. So that would be a response that we would send to them.
Okay.
Even at that point, Rob, if it comes back and he's only deficient a few things, we can make the recommendation that he go back and achieve those, whatever other educational requirements are, which I know is a nuisance.
And let me go a little further and say, if something similar to this were to come up again, and they were to ask to go for the board, could we say to staff, great, but would you communicate with them regardless of how you feel about it, we feel about it? The board is not empowered to change what you've got as it stands today.
I follow you. What you're saying is we should, if it's okay with this committee, then we would, as a staff, tell them on the front end, go ahead and get it reviewed before we submit it to the board.
Right.
Instead of going through a two-step process, we will take that one step out and just go ahead and kick it back to them.
Because the board can't
Right.
act on it.
This is just an efficiency question
Sure.
of we spent 30 minutes now dealing with something that we can't do anything about.
Right. No, and that makes sense.
So
if you guys,
why and we've done this.
That's
I'm
a
new
good
here.
idea.
But I'm new here, but we've done this a lot, and so let's not talk about things that we can talk about changing it down the road and changing rules and new legislation, but in these situations, we can't do anything about it. And so,
okay.
can we direct staff to tell them, with this submission, they can't help you?
Sure.
You've got to do something else in order for them to do that.
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Previously, like a few years ago, I used to always do that. But it got to where recently we would approve technology degrees if it was substantially equivalent. Before, we never did that. So I always stopped them on the front end and told them flat out, your degree is technology, you do not qualify, and you can't get registered.
Wonder,
Maybe we
didn't
can-
they
maybe
have
we
to
can
prove
change that
that
if
they
you-
were substantially equivalent?
Yeah, but before, even if it was a technology and was substantially equivalent, we still told them no.
Yeah, you're right about that. That was kind of previous.
But
Nine out of
since
10.
we stopped doing that, then I quit doing that. I just brought it to the board first because you changed kind of
9 out of
changed a
10
little bit.
people would, if we told them that, they would say, okay, never mind. But in this case, what we're saying is the board has recommended a review. that's your only option at this point. And then from that point on, the applicant can say, okay, and they'll take care of it. But from here on out, we could offer that to every applicant on the front end, if that's the direction you want us to go, and then they could have the option of whether or not they want to pursue that.
I think our goal is to try to help each of them understand, hopefully before it comes to this board and we tell them statutorily we can't do it, is to help them understand in advance, if you want to get to yes, here is the route to try to do it. Here are the mechanisms to do it.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll kick this one back, and we'll tell him he's got options, and that you all will take it up again after he's had his curriculum reviewed. Fair?
And I think what Wanda was saying, I mean, if it comes to us with a review and that says it's substantially equivalent, then we're empowered to act. But if it comes to us without that, we're not.
Correct.
Regardless of how we feel about it or where they are, how long they practice anything, we're just not. And so I think I'm trying for them to go through waiting for us to 2 months to meet and blah, 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 and all that kind of, just to short circuit all that and say, you got to bring something else before they can act.
Well, we could take a look at our FAQs or something in that regard and maybe put a notice on the website pertaining to technology degrees as it currently resides within the statutes that says, if you would like to be fully considered for a technology degree, please supply a curriculum review on the front end, and thus eliminating that second step or the need for the second step.
That's
okay.
It's possible. It seems like it once was possible, then it's not possible, but maybe we can get back to it being possible to do that.
Well, since it's not a requirement, we can suggest it and we can put it on our website, but that still, we couch it still as an option. Like option is available to you to help expedite the process. Otherwise, we're just going to tell you at the next step, you have to get a review. Something like that. We'll work with it and we'll get that message onto the website.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
Wanda, you're exactly right. And I think I was probably one of the ones that, because it did seem unfair that we'd have a foreign degree that we would evaluate and tell them they were deficient in all these things. But we had some potential for technology degrees that fit in the exact same mold that if they were evaluated would either have a deficiency or would meet the standard. And we weren't evaluating, U.S. degrees, but we were evaluating somebody from a foreign country. That never, from a logic standpoint, never made sense to me. So as long as we have that evaluation, I think we're good.
Anything else on Mr. Osborne? Next item is NCWS Statement of Cooperation.
Does everybody have a copy of that? It was sent digitally via email. I know some of you have your computers here and the ability to pull that up. Does anybody need a hard copy? Eric has a hard copy right now in his hand. I've got another one up here.
Is it a separate email?
It was, just with the committee information. Mr. Bursai brought this up after a meeting. Ricky, would you, do you want to kind of kick this off while Mr. King takes a look at it?
Also, I meant to thank Ricky earlier for the notes. You sent out Ricky's notes. That's very helpful, and I wanted to note that appreciate Ricky doing that. So, Ricky, go ahead if you want to explain the cooperation agreement.
Sure. This has been something that I think NCES has been talking about the last couple of years that they have put together. And the goal is to have every one of the member boards sign on to this agreement, to have it 100%. And it basically says, I think, that we're all trying kind of within the limitations of kind of recognizing that every state has their own laws and that sort of thing. But we all agree that we are trying to eliminate barriers as long as it kind of goes along with public health, safety, welfare, that were kind of unnecessary barriers. I guess there's some necessary barriers maybe, but getting rid of unnecessary barriers and being as letting licensing have mobility between jurisdictions as much as is possible. So it's kind of a memo of understanding. I don't think we're making a pledge that we're going to change all the laws to say that we agree with universal licensure, which is, if universal licensure, if I've got that term right, is where if you're licensed in any of the board of any of the jurisdictions, then you agree by comity to accept anybody who's licensed in another state, basically. I don't think this is talking about universal licensure. It's really just saying that everybody agrees that we're working towards more mobility and less barriers, less difference between the states where we can. Did anybody else read it? And does that?
Ricky, this is Michael. I would like to point out that at the bottom it does state this is a non-binding resolution. I would also add for the group here that there have been states that have not signed this as it's currently written. I can't rattle them off the top of my head, but there have been other states that have signed it, or most states have, some haven't. So I just want you all to
understand
be aware of that.
Why they would. I mean, to me, if you don't act on this, and this is developed as a resolution by an organization that we defer to determine, I guess, model law, or to some extent model law for licensure. If you don't comply with it, and you don't attest to it, then wouldn't that sort of expose us to some level of liability?
I don't believe so.
Well, if our law is different and it disallows something that occurs in 40 other states, wouldn't it be I'm glad Maria was shaking her head yes, because I feel like this has to be true, that if we sign on and attest to this, that hey, we agree with this, and our laws don't reflect that we are culpable.
I don't read it that way. I read it, all that we're saying is we're committed to working towards getting our laws together, and this comes back to what are we empowered to do? We're not the legislature of this state.
There's several terms in here related to unnecessary barriers to licensure. And if it's perceived that one, if we sign this, that we agree that we should eliminate these unnecessary barriers to licensure. And if you look, I've looked at what some other states allow. And like Robert said earlier, there are states that allow just an ETAC degree, period. That's enough. Even whether it's equivalent to an EAC degree or not, they'll still allow it towards licensure. And and as other people have pointed out, there's a huge variation in what the curriculums are in some of these engineering technology programs. I don't think that's protecting the public's health, safety, and welfare by allowing that towards licensure. But there are states that just all they require is that ETAC degree.
I would say that I would say if those states sign on to this, then they are committing to upgrading their standards for licensures to meet what is. I know I mean, it's no longer the minority of states that require an ABET accredited degree. I mean, it's. I mean, 35 years ago there was only 11 states. Now, I don't know the number, but I think it's a whole lot more. So,
with some caveats.
Yeah. So I don't read this as saying states with more restrictive requirements are in signing on to reduce them as much as I read it to say the states are talking about coming together at some point, hopefully, reasonable in the middle point of making it easier for comedy and all those other things across the country. So, I mean, I see what you're saying. I understand this, but I don't see in any commitment here to downgrade our standards in order to be part of this.
Yeah,
resolution.
I read it completely differently from that. I read it exactly the opposite. That if we don't agree to create some moderation, and I'm not talking about going to the least common denominator necessarily, although I would think it would be a lot harder for some of those states that are allowing just straight out ETAC degrees to come up and not allow that anymore without additional education or experience requirements. Than it would be for us to allow an ETAC degree with certain conditions on it. I think it would be easier for us to relax a little bit than it would be for them to get more stringent. But I do think, just again, I read a lot of contracts, as all of us do. But to me, when I read this the first time, I thought, why would we sign this? But I'd be curious to get our attorneys and our professional service representatives input on this.
Alton, if I may, to kind of support what you're saying, that if we look at the second to the last, or actually what's being resolved, that in the second to the last one, where it says that signatory boards are committed to work towards revising current licensing laws, rules, and policies for more streamlined approval. And the last one, are committed to minimizing or eliminating. I guess somebody who was turned down, an applicant who was turned down, could say, this board signed this 6 years ago, and there really hadn't been any law changes. And they hadn't done what they said they were going to do. Has that created some liability for us as a board? That's a good question. And there are a lot of people. I don't know how many people were on the engineers forum that was it last week. The NCES engineers forum. I think Robert, you were.
Yes.
I was too.
There are a lot of people worried that it's universal licensure and attempts to become all equal is not bringing up the states that, like there are a couple of states that don't even require a college degree to become a professional engineer. It's that we're not requiring them to come up. It's all going to go down the lowest common denominator. That's what a lot of people think is the natural course of the way this is going to go.
We've got two, hopefully, opinions that I'd really like to hear, and Casey is at the podium. Casey's at the bat.
Never heard that before. Hello. Casey Anderson. I am the executive director of the American Council of Engineering Companies of Tennessee and the Tennessee Society of Professional Engineers. I just saw this for the very first time, but my immediate thought is that first resolve says pretty clearly that the following signatories agree to license a comedy applicant that meets nationally recognized standards in the most expeditious. I mean, that says to me that if you sign this, you are agreeing to take anyone who meets NCAAS standards.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that I had highlighted, that we agree, not that we shall strive towards or something like that, but that we agree to license a comedy applicant, just like you said. And then the second one is we increase licensure portability aligns with government initiatives to diversify economies. Well, since when is licensure a government initiative? It is a protecting the health, safety, and welfare, which I understand is a function of government, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's why you license people and why you should have that. So it's almost like they're also trying to solve another issue here where it comes to a tax on licensure through this document instead of saying it. And Marie, I'll let you talk here in just a second. I'm sorry for jumping in, but if I don't say, I'm getting to be like my mom. If I don't say it, it doesn't get out very quickly. What did we, when we're members of NCAAS, did we? I mean, I would think by being a member of NCAAS, we have acknowledged that NCAAS has a model law. We are members of NCAAS. We have a seat at the table, that we are acknowledging all these things. We're trying to make our process better. We're trying to get where we can to be as portable as possible. We are agreeing with other states that we're doing this. So except for looking pretty and maybe some other insidious thing, which I reckon the conspiracy theory in me always thinks there's a story behind the story, what does this actually buy us? Because we've agreed to be a member of NCAAS for all these reasons, and we're paying them or whatever we're doing. So what does this reinforce that we've not already reinforced? That's my question, I suppose. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, totally fine. Thank you. I will say this is the first time I've seen this document today as well. So I would like time to further review and not just provide, off the cuff legal advice to you all on this document, but just an initial review. My issue is with everyone else's at fourth from the bottom, the resolved, that you're agreeing to license comedy applicants. I mean, there is a caveat that's going to be within the jurisdiction, Tennessee's licensing laws and statutes. But this is a very interesting document. I don't know if my initial thought is that I would recommend you all proceed. And just another thought is that NCEES is a service that we utilize to help facilitate what we do. And so this document kind of looks like we're agreeing to support that, to further their association or whatever it may be. So just my thought. And I think from our discussions and from the rules that I've worked on with you all, it always has been our aim to promote ease of licensure and comedy, reciprocity, amongst the states. So, and then one final thought is that I need to check with, not that we can say you in your individual capacity can't sign documents, that's not the point, but just as a board, I'm not sure if we would need higher approval from the department or support maybe from the department on how we enter into contracts with not that it's I mean, I don't know what this is, but anyhow, a non-binding resolution, we might need, a little bit more guidance, or there might be policies about how we move forward on this. I will say with other boards and working with the private associations, sometimes we've had to have, the administration sign off on it as well. But yeah, if you would let me talk to my supervisor and, kind of review this in further detail.
We could,
They have a
Shouldn't.
Just give me a second. I'll pull up that email.
while you're doing that, I have one comment. A lot of I sort of agree with both sides that as we've discussed it. I see some good things that I think we're trying to do, and I see some concerns, but there's one concern that hadn't been mentioned. And those of you who have been at these NCWS meetings and listened to discussions about changes in the model law, there's some pretty extreme views reflected in that discussion. And that would be my concern, not what's out there right now. It's what NCWS might do in the future that we would be signing that we're going to strive to change the Tennessee law to match.
Certainly. And then also another consideration is that you all have the discretion to make recommendations to changes in the rules pending, the governor's approval, the attorney general's approval, and the legislator's approval. But you all don't really have the discretion to say we're going to change our statute to match your model law.
And at some of these meetings, it feels to me like some of the other board members are saying, well, we did this, so all you states need to go back and change your law. Well, even if we wanted to, it's not that easy.
And some people, their laws are written such that they've got a lot more flexibility in changing rules and going back and forth. But
maybe that's it.
So you brought one quick thing, and I'll shut up after this. Do we have a contract with NCWS? I'm sure we have some sort of I'd just be curious to see what that language in that contract says. Do we just provide a service, or is there some caveats in there?
I have an answer now to the deadline question. Sorry, you may have to repeat if you were addressing me just then. The deadline is December 31, 2021. And other than that, there's a sub deadline of the end of June to be considered for
June of 21.
Yeah. So we got this after the last meeting and before this meeting. So there's plenty of time to do it. They just, it says if you didn't get it in by the end of June, they won't read off your name at the national meeting.
Oh, heck. Oh no.
I reckon this is just a comment, not to jump in, but if you're going to review this document, look at too, you mentioned that we've got a contract with them. I want, or do we or not? I don't, but if we've got some sort of, and it may just be some general service contract that says we agree to take these services or whatever, but also maybe just pop that open and see if there's something in there that has any kind of binding language or other language that talks about that. I mean, I would be curious, because to me, it seems like by signing a contract and agreeing to their services, we're also agreeing to be involved in that whole organization and the discussion that goes around portability of licensure and that kind of mobility. But anyway, I'll just be curious. That's all.
Michael, what Robert had asked while you were looking for the date is, do we have a contract or some sort of formal agreement? He was doing something else. I don't think he caught what I was talking.
Well, I mean, I can go take a look at the invoices and see if there's any disclaimers or anything on that. I think we pay for the membership out of this board's budget. And it's my understanding that membership has been going on for quite some time, well before probably any of you all were on the board. So we can go back and look at it, but I don't think that's ever come up for discussion in my time here. So it never occurred to me to look and see if there was a contract per se. Just generally, I think when you sign up for membership in a group or an organization, you're agreeing to whatever it is that that they kind of put out there.
Interesting. I mean, in our case, one of the things that we depend on them for is not necessarily model law, because we sort of have our own, but is the determination about equivalency for education and setting those standards and helping determine what those are and preparing the exams. I mean, outside of that, though, I mean, we pretty well chart our own course.
It's within the purview of this committee to make a recommendation that we as an organization not sign this in its current form. We could say something to the effect of, we agree in principle, however, we can't sign this document in its current state. So you have the ability to do that if you want, or we could send it up for further review and talk about it again in 2 months.
I would prefer to give Marie a chance to review it and take it up in October, if that's okay. Ricky, what do you think?
I agree. I think that we need to know legally if there are problems with this and what they are, because if we say we can't sign it in its current form, they're going to say, okay, so what do you have a problem with? And so I think it's going to lead to a review anyway.
Okay, anything else on this item? No motion required, I take it. Okay.
I would be interested if someone could find out what's the purpose. What are they trying to accomplish? I don't think it's anything nefarious. I remember having to go to Las Vegas and take an oral exam about acidic soil and gas piping when I got registered 30 years ago, and that kind of ridiculous stuff, in New York was the same way, and that kind of ridiculous stuff is gone, and it should be gone.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm not sure
So-
NCAAS had anything to do with that. That probably may have been the licensing boards themselves. Kind of like there was a time when you had to do an oral exam here. You had to go in front of the licensing board and present your case.
I don't want to.
yeah,
What you're saying is exactly right. NCAAS and having universal testing has helped us avoid that. I will say, just from the things that I've been around with NCAAS, great people, and I think in most cases their heart's in the right place. However, just like Steve said, there seem to be some elements on different sides that if they kind of took over the thing,
yeah, I'd love to know more about what you said, outlandish
Look,
ideas and stuff, but we can do that all
maybe one of these days when we're out of this pandemic, you'll get to go to a meeting.
Well, I was supposed to go next week.
Oh, are you? Okay,
And wear
great.
a mask, but
Great. Well, I don't.
I'm.
It'll depend. There's just a certain little group of people that I don't know how they stay on the board so long, but they're just
they've
historical.
got a larger voice.
They're
than
the
they should.
historical figures, and when they stand up, everybody at NCAAS listens to them.
Are you talking about Robert and Alton?
No,
Nope.
This is the national board. Thank you, sir.
They've been on there. They've been on NCAAS.
And you just got me 2 more years to kick around. So speak on.
Robert, I told Michael that there have been votes before where Tennessee was a lone wolf on one side or the other.
Yep. Right.
Exactly right.
A lot of them have to do with budgets, but there are some other more engineering issues that we don't agree with or haven't agreed with in the past.
And Rob, just to give you one quick example, I don't want to, but there was a thing that came up a few years ago about structural licensure.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
And again, I understand there's certain structures may need some more experience or whatever. But they wanted to start separating this licensure out as its own license, and they wanted this license. So where do you stop? I mean, that kind of goes against what we've thought here as far as your experience. And so there's some of those that come up that if the right people came up, all of a sudden you'd have 75 different licensures for one thing. And anyway, there's just some things there that would cause me to be uneasy.
Non-lawyer in me reads words like unnecessary and streamline and stuff like that. And
That's all correct.
And what I'm telling you is that definition is in the eyes of the beholder, and those are meaningless to me as far as commitment. But I would love to know what they're trying to accomplish with this, and sense of what's worked for years ago, and hopefully with the better might be worth.
Eric, I can read to you a segment of this email that they sent, which accompanied this, and it says, "We believe this resolution is very timely, with so many states facing recent legislative efforts to weaken the requirements and processes for comedy licensure. Signing the resolution is an easy and effective way to highlight your board's commitment to improving licensure mobility."
What I just said. I think that's they're trying to show everybody that we're playing ball, and that we are really trying to make licensure super easy, and we don't have any barriers to competition, and when we don't, I mean, our job is health, safety, and welfare. But this is anyway.
Oh, okay.
That's what the way I read this document, and your email kind of reinforces some of that.
I think that Maria taking a better look at it is the right way to go, especially with terms like agrees to in it. Yep. Agrees to and non-binding are kind of contradictory.
Would you care to forward us that email so we could read the entire email from NCWS?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay. Anything else on this item? Next item, graduate degrees, concurrent experience. Is that something new, or is that a continuation of what we've been talking about?
That is something Mr. Barrick wanted to bring up.
Okay.
Correct? Or did we already cover that?
It was. Yeah.
Okay.
A couple of times in the last few months, I have been asked to. I get an email saying I want you to break a tie, where we have a difference of opinion among board members about things. And one of the ones that came up was experience before someone received their master's degree or while they were getting the master's degree. And so I come from this from the standpoint of, I went back and got an MBA on Friday and Saturday, and while I was working 50 hours a week. And for you to tell me that my work experience during the time that I was, a lot of people go to work full time while they're getting the part of what they need. That
Double dipping is what I think.
that it's double dipping.
Yeah.
While it could be true, they could be back in school full time and not working, and then but while it might not be true. And I'm just trying to get to a census among us, maybe, of an undergraduate degree. This was a case where I think felt double dipping and other didn't, and so tiebreaker. And there was another tiebreaker issue. Most of this is just for me to get educated about how you all feel about it, so I can join one side or the other, or we can all get together on one side.
Hey, Steve, can I take a stab at this?
Sure.
So what I see is the think the intent of the way our rules are written is that we require 4 years of progressive experience. And then there are some things you can do to earn credit. One of those is have a master's degree. You can get credit for a year if you get a master's degree. So the way I think the intent is, if you get your bachelor's and you're starting on the road to getting your 4 years, and you're in school for a year and a half, two, whatever, getting your just say a year getting your master's, and then when you go to work, you only have to work 3 years before you get your 4 years of experience in our eyes, because you've got 3 years of work and that first year of the master's program, or wherever that fits in time wise. What we get when we get some applications where the elapsed time between the bachelor and all the progressive experience by our rules has to come after the qualifying degree, which is the bachelor's degree. So we get some applications that are only 3 years after the bachelor's degree, because they've worked 3 years and they were going to night school to get a master's at the same time. And we had this discussion probably 2 or 3 years ago, and I think it was a split vote, but I think we basically agreed that no, we were really looking to have 4 years of elapsed time, and that if you had 3 years of experience and got your master's during those 3 years, that's what we call double dipping, and we're looking for the 4 years calendar wise to approve. And so I think that's what we're saying is you need 4 years of experience, and one of those years can be getting a master's degree, but you still need 4 years. I think that's what most of us agreed was the way we wanted to look at this. But guys, correct me if I'm wrong.
Robert, is that what you were asking?
Wanda, help me out here. Difference in interpretation on the person that had the master's degree, was that about not having the full 4 years? I mean, it seems like I remember they had a lot of experience before they got the master's degree, and the master's degree became the qualifying degree because their undergraduate degree wasn't ABET accredited. No. It wasn't?
So they were trying to use the master's as the 4th year of experience. They had a qualifying degree.
Okay. Ricky said he was good with it. Robert said he wasn't.
Both Campbell and Burnside disapproved.
Because they didn't have the 4 years of progressive experience yet.
Correct. They had 3 years and the master's.
Then there was no tiebreaker for me to.
Well, you were. Was that the tiebreaker one?
You asked me for 2 tiebreakers.
Oh, he was the tiebreaker on those. You approved.
Okay.
You approved, and Burnside disapproved. So I sent it to Campbell as a tiebreaker.
Okay.
And just part of the discussion, Ricky, you're right. We got to where one of the parts of that discussion, and I don't know if this came from NCAAS or not as well, but there was some discussion about how you verify whether that was the time they were doing it was they were really had 40 years or 40 hours during the week or full time. My dad had the same situation. He worked full time during the day, and 2 nights a week he went and got his master's. And that's
what I did, but I couldn't get it done in 3 years, so it didn't matter.
Yeah. So and today you have some of these master's programs that are only a year and a half or something. That's right. That are not as long for whatever reason. So I think part of the discussion was it was almost impossible for us to verify during that time if they were really working the necessarily full 40 hour or full time experience. That's what I remember as well. So, and then I still want to think NCAAS came out with something too that was part of their model law that said
I think you're right.
that you can't double dip, and it made sense in our discussion at that time. So, the same organization that I don't trust or anything came out with that as their model law recommendation.
But I do think that if we had a way to verify it, that if an applicant can get a master's degree in 3 years and work full time, I'd let them sit for the exam if it was up to me, because that's a lot of work to do that. You should be congratulated, because I only took one. It's quarters back then. I just took one class a quarter, and it took me 3 years just to get the coursework in, and then I had to do the thesis part. Then I drug my feet for another 3 years.
I'm not saying great. So this is Myers.
Mr. Barrick, did you give a name there? Where
Myers.
Myers is who we're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the first name?
Matthew. I understand it. We're not allowed to talk to each other outside of this boardroom about a specific application, correct? That's the reason I want educated.
So what you
I'd be
just
glad to take this offline, but I think I wasn't allowed to.
no, you're well. What you said is part of our discussion, because we had the exact same thing when we discussed it and said, does it make sense? Because you have people that are, like you said, are working 40, 50 hours a week and then going to school afterwards and doing that. But then you have the other situation, and how do we effectively verify those situations? I mean, just
You can sort of kind of do it from the application, but you can't really.
I think that came down to we just, we may be making mistakes on some people, but we're making a mistake with a year. We're not like permanently banning them to do something. So I think that we thought that was a more conservative approach, but that's the memory that doesn't work all the time too. Carlton's. There you go.
And
That's what I was afraid of.
And I don't think we want to get into looking at people who can say they work 60 and 70 hours a week for the first 3 years of the career that they've already got 4 years of experience in, which all of us probably did. I think the 4 calendar years after the qualifying degree make it kind of clear, a more clear thing that we can judge from an application.
Mr. Barrick, Myers.
His experience not under a PE, was that the
Oh, I'm sorry. Campbell disapproved it. Let's see what he said. I don't see progressive engineering experience. I see surveying, layout, inspection, some project management, and maybe bits and pieces of other things.
that was
Myers.
a different question, and that goes back to this question we've discussed before. Licensure TDOT employees are a great example that are on the construction site. They're working under a PE. They're not doing design. And here's my question: if they're not doing design, and they're not stamping drawings, and they're not working under a PE, our granting them the ability to get licensed.
I think I know where you're going with that.
Even if you've got a license, you're not allowed to practice outside of your area of expertise. And if you've never designed a bridge, us giving you a license doesn't give you a license if all you were doing was messing with gravel and signing completion orders on a job site, if that was your job. And so it seems that we do license, we have in the past. I got guys working for me that are licensed that worked for TDOT their entire career and never did a drawing. So the question is, how do we come to some place where we understand and agree with what is necessary progressive experience?
I had exactly that same question, and Wanda has a document that talks about the definition of, the services that you can provide as an engineer that meet those minimum standards, and that's usually what I refer back to.
That's part of the
You should
rules
have
now,
that.
that document about progressive experience.
It's got, Rob, it's got a bunch of different categories, and construction is part of that says, if you were scheduling, it's got stuff like corrosion. It's got all kinds of topics.
So that is documented.
That is documented.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
you need a copy of that, though. It would help you.
I do. That.
Yeah.
There's my question, and there's the answer. Thank you so much.
Right now, that is on the website, kind of listed out, but I'll send you the document, and we have it implemented in rule. It's effective very soon, this month, I think, but I just went before GovOps to have that adopted as a rule.
Maria, if you don't mind, I had mine in paper copy that Wanda was kind enough to share with me. If you electronically send that to me, I could put it where I could find it. That would be really
send
handy.
it to all of us. That's a good
Certainly.
reminder.
Me
I'll
too.
do that. Yep.
Thank you.
Another thing that
Those were my two questions, my two agenda questions that I wanted to talk about, Michael. Thank you.
Oh, and
Sometimes-
the way, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sometimes what comes up with TDOT experience is, are they really doing engineering?
Sure.
So we've had that discussion.
Sure we
So
have.
I don't know.
No,
I don't know the specifics of the situation that you're referring to, but that's just another thing that, and Robert has talked about this a lot at meetings, and I think even tried to work with some of the TDOT supervisors about that. But it may just be how they describe their work activities rather than. But we struggle with that sometimes too.
Yeah, and so part of that, and again, this sheet will help, I think, explain some of what you're talking about. But one of the things that really is difficult from some of those applications, especially when you look at the construction side, are they an active participant in helping solve the problems that are out there, and what are they doing to kind of be part of that solution versus I'm just recording strikes and balls, right? I'm just out there counting loads of dirt or whatever, and that's what I've talked to several applicants about is you need to explain to me what you're doing to solve problems that are out there, not just, hey, this didn't work, so I threw it over the wall to give to somebody. And you've got both situations that happen.
But we have sent those back before too, Robert, at our recommendation, and then come back with, oh, I understand what you're asking now. Yeah, sure. We had this. Well, let me elaborate. We had this problem, and I helped kind of craft an alternative design, and here's what we did. And it really does help them understand and elaborate a little more on the specifics that comply with actually these guidelines.
That's great. That'll help a lot.
Yeah, that sheet will help you some. But
Yeah.
that's, as well as I do, when you go on construction sites, some of these things, they call themselves construction engineers, and man, they're not doing any more than that's really all they're doing, and
Filling out
And
a-
I've learned more from some contractors that got no license than
1,000%.
I've
No,
learned
no.
from any engineer.
No, 1,000% agree with you.
They're both ends of the spectrum.
yeah, 1,000% agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. That'll help.
Anything else on that item?
I was just going to say what brought the double dipping to your attention is when I sent you an email about Myers, I also told you that the folder had been reviewed by another board member and they didn't approve because of the double dipping.
Oh, okay.
So that's what brought it to your attention that it was a thing. And
okay,
you approved it.
But Myers was the wrong guy. Okay, we got it.
You
now.
approved it, and so then I had to send it to Campbell.
So you just
because-
doxed me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wanda.
Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
You set you up.
Well, I've slept since then, so thank you for bringing,
Michael, do you have
bringing it all together.
Oh, sir, I'm just glad we got something resolved today.
As we begin to break up and adjourn, I just wanted to point out on the NCWS resolution, there's a link in that email you just sent that has a little graphic of the states in red that have already signed it. So the email mentioned they're tracking it actively. So I don't know. Would you say that's half?
Half, probably.
Roughly
yeah.
half.
At least
That's
in
for
Maryland, Mass, it's
that's for bragging and shaming.
Yep, that's what it's for.
Yeah. Hey, Steve,
Yes, Ricky.
we've got on this, I can see that on the chat box of the WebEx that Mr. Tim Montgomery is on with us, and he's got a question that he put in the chat box. So I don't know if Tim, if you want to recognize Tim to have him ask his question.
Are you on WebEx, Michael?
I'm not. Wanda is actually hosting the broadcast from here in this room, or actually Laura Costin is hosting the broadcast. Wanda's the link here in the room, but this gentleman could be unmuted, and if he does have a question, he would be able to. If you'd like to entertain that, you could allow it.
We would want to hear that, wouldn't we?
Yeah, that's fine.
We've added things to the agenda that weren't on the original agenda, so sure. I mean, that's our purpose for being here.
If someone was here and asked to speak, we would allow it.
Absolutely, we would. They'd be considered a visitor that
So
we'd acknowledge.
can you unmute him and,
Just read his question.
or,
I can read the question.
okay.
I recently inquired about qualification for the PE. My undergraduate degree isn't qualifying. My master's degree would be the qualifying degree.
And I can provide further elaboration. I don't know if y'all can hear me or not.
Mr.
I was
McDonald?
directed.
Or Montgomery, I'm sorry. That's Mr. Montgomery?
That's okay. Yes, Mr. Tim Montgomery.
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I had recently inquired about the P. I'm actually coming up on the, I guess, qualifying time if my master's was counted. As a little bit of a background on myself, my undergraduate degree is actually in biology. I worked as a researcher in water quality for the University of Georgia for a few years before returning ultimately to get a master's in environmental engineering from Georgia Tech. And I've been working now for 3.5 years full time with a consulting firm, Bart's Design Solutions, and was just kind of curious about Tennessee's, since I would not qualify by all statutes, about any avenue to pursue to qualify essentially within the state for my PE examination.
Want to answer that, Robert?
Let me try to answer it. So right now, the
Sure.
master's degree is not a qualifying degree. That went out of our statute probably about 2 or 3 years ago, I believe. However, we are in the process of rewriting some of our laws and rules that allow other ways for licensure, and the master's is certainly part of that mix. When that gets approved is another story. Could it happen next year? Possibly. Could it happen 2 years from now, 3 years, or could it never happen? I mean, that's, it's been kind of, we've got it in, I think, sort of review stage right now, but if, when, and how it happens is another question. So currently, no, but it is our desire to try to have other ways, including the masters, as a way to get there. We're not there yet in any official capacity. So what I'm telling you is just for information more than anything.
Okay, thank you for clarifying on that.
Hope it did. I felt like I jumbled too much.
I think you got it, Robert. Okay, anything else to come before the committee today?
Nothing from me.
Ricky, you have anything else since I can't see your face?
I guess Rob and I are slated to go down to New Orleans, and I guess we'll be voting in the business sessions there. And I don't know if anybody looked over what was on the docket in the way of motions and that sort of thing. If there's if somebody saw something, they want to make sure we vote one way or another. Otherwise, Rob and I will be flipping coins the whole time.
I don't recall seeing anything that was one way or the other, Ricky.
Okay.
But, I mean, everybody can look and get back to you, I suppose.
Hey, Ricky, do
Yeah.
you have a few minutes after this is over for us to talk a little bit about that meeting? I mean,
Yeah.
offline, just you and me.
I do. We'll make sure we tell legal we won't be talking about board policy or anything. We'll be talking
We're
about.
talking about travel arrangements.
Just for the
talking-
record, it will not be board matters. It
Yeah.
will be just travel for an independent associations meeting.
I'm
So-
talking about the COVID rules for masks in New Orleans, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Right.
What's your what number is best to call you on?
I'll get that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hearing no other business, we stand adjourned.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
There is an iPad up here.